Hi! Today I'm going to talk about some fun reptile facts. Thanks for stopping by. Here are some fun facts about reptiles. Bearded dragons are illegal to own in Hawaii. I guess I'm never moving there. You probably already knew this, but in case you didn't, bearded dragons are native to Australia. If you buy a bearded dragon and you do not live in Australia, it is definitely captive bred. You will not get a wild caught one because they are only native to Australia. On the downside, we won't get any new genetics in the bearded dragon genetic pool. If it's not a bearded dragon and you can take it from the wild, don't take it from the wild. Please don't. It's just that sometimes breeders will get one from the wild and incorporate it into their breeding project to try to get in new blood, new genes, basically make their lines fresher. Reptiles lick or tongue flick the air. It's their way of smelling things. They have what's called a Jacobson's organ inside of their mouth, so that when they flick their tongue, they can tell who you are. They can smell their food. Basically, the pheromones that you give off help them to know who you are. So, for example, when I initially changed my hair, I used to have really long hair, and then I cut it and I started dyeing it. Kaiju looked at me kind of like, who are you? But then he licked the air by me and he kind of seemed to like be at ease. So they do that as a way to identify who you are. It's also believed that reptiles can sense fear and stress through the tongue flicking and absorbing the pheromones through their tongue. So if you're super stressed or having an argument, your dragon might be sensing that tension, and you might notice them hiding or cowering. If I'm in a really tense mood, I will usually decide to take it outside of the reptile room because it's not good for them to feel that tension. They're just, poor little creatures, and they don't need that. If you have a reptile that can climb walls, they probably have tiny little hairs on their fingers called setae. It's kind of like Velcro for their feet, and their ability to stick can depend on the humidity. So if you see your gecko falling off the glass or jumping and falling, it's possible that it's not humid enough in their enclosure. It's also possible that they have stuck shut on their feet. So you'll want to go ahead and mist their enclosure, check the humidity levels, make sure that they're okay, because that might be why they're falling. Some reptiles do not have eyelids. Crested geckos and chihuahuas, for example, do not have eyelids. Their eyes sink in when they sleep. Snakes do not have eyelids. And from what I've seen, they don't do the eye sinking thing. At least mine doesn't do that. I don't know if that's across all snake species. You pretty much have to make a movement to see if your snake is awake. So I'll go like this, and Flacco will kind of move if that's the case. If he's awake, he'll move. Or if I wake him up, I guess, he'll move. Here is a cold-blooded fact. Because reptiles are cold-blooded, they need outside heat to make them warm so they can properly digest their food. That's why with bearded dragons, you'll want to make sure they have at least 2 hours of light before they eat their meals, and at least 2 hours after, so they can properly digest their meals. That way they're able to digest their meals properly. So if you pick them up and they feel cold, that makes sense. If you clean their poo and it's cold, that makes sense. It was the weirdest thing when I first did it. I was like, wait a second, this is cold. That's okay. So, and that makes sense. Now you know why. Most reptiles are cold-blooded, with an exception of the Argentine black and white tegu. They are warm-blooded. So if you have a cold-blooded reptile, which is most of them, if you wrap them in a blanket, that will actually not make them warmer, because what blankets do is they keep the heat in, and since they're not generating their own heat, it doesn't actually warm them up. So in times of power outages, what I've done is I have put kaiju inside my jacket or shirt or hoodie, and held him close to me so that he can get my heat and he can be warm. So that's something that's good to do in the case of a power outage. But if you think wrapping them in a blanket is going to make them warm, it will not keep them warm. In fact, it might make them feel colder. I made a video that covers emergency situations such as storms and power outages, and I'll include a link in the description for you to check it out if you haven't already. I hope it's helpful to you. Anthropomorphize. I hope I'm saying that right. It's assuming non-humans can feel human emotions. Reptiles, unfortunately, can't love you. They don't have that ability to love you. It doesn't mean that they won't be fond of you or miss you when you're gone or have a preference over you over someone else, but they just don't have that ability to love. So when people say, oh, my reptile loves me, they're probably fond of you, but they can't love you, unfortunately. But that's okay. You can learn unconditional love through loving your reptile. Also, if you're somebody who's dating and you meet somebody who has a bearded dragon and they take really, really good care of their bearded dragon, probably a very nurturing person. Just saying. Bearded dragons have what's called a quick in their nails. So there's part of their nail that you can cut, and then there's a part called the quick that if you cut into it, it will make them bleed. There are nerves in there, so you don't want to do that. It's like the nail that you can cut is this tiny, tiny little part, and then there's a bump. Personally, I don't cut my bearded dragon's nails. They've only been cut once, and they were cut by my vet. Instead, what I do is I put rough surfaces in the enclosure. Not only does that help with his nails, it also helps wear down his pores. If you're concerned about the nails being long, and that's why you want to cut them because you don't want to be scratched, one thing you can do that will actually work even better is to just wear a hoodie. I often have a go-to hoodie that I wear. That's why in a lot of my pictures you'll notice I'm wearing a green hoodie. It's the hoodie I grab before I take Kaiju out. In most instances, I will put that on. He's gotten so used to it that when he sees it, he is like super excited sometimes. I mean, not all the time, but sometimes he's like, oh, she's going to take me out. So it's kind of like his sign. And I only wear it when I handle him. If I had another reptile that I handled consistently that could scratch me, I would probably wear a different hoodie. So then they know when I'm handling them, because he does actually realize it. Now we're going to talk about defense mechanisms. Tails and the skin. Okay, so you probably know that geckos can drop their tail, and some of them grow back, some of them do not. So keep that in mind. If geckos feel threatened, or if they're a crested gecko and they just happen to see their reflection, they might drop their tail. Seriously, my crested gecko was in his enclosure all by himself at night. Nobody was there, hadn't been there for hours. I went in to go check on them because I always do that before I go to sleep, and his tail was gone. So, well, it was dropped, and I have a whole video on that. But I didn't do anything. No one did anything. He just dropped it one day. So I still miss the tail. It was so cute. But I threw it away. Now, if you have leopard gecko or an African fat-tailed gecko, they will grow their tails back. They will never look the same, but those tails are used like fat storage, and it can be a defense mechanism. So if they drop it, it's because they're scared. But the reason why they grow it back is they can use that as storage. So if, say, they don't get food right away in the wild, they have that stored up in there so they won't just die. In fact, if you lose a leopard gecko or African fat-tailed gecko in your house, which I hope you don't, but if that happens, most likely they will live a long time because they have that storage in their tail. I've heard of people losing theirs and then like 3 months later finding it somewhere and going, wait a second, they're still around. They were just hiding. So obviously lock your enclosures, make sure that they don't get out, and if they do get out, get them back right away. But don't just assume that if they got out and they hid that they're gone forever. They might just be hiding and you might see them someday. Now Chihuahua geckos, they will drop their tail, and if they are pine isle, they won't grow it back. If they're mainland, and those guys are a little bit smaller, they will grow back. However, I've heard that there's been some crossbreeding, so it's hard to know if the mainland are actually the mainland. The pine isle is usually what you're going to see in the trade. If you have a gargoyle gecko, they will drop and regrow their tail, and drop and regrow their tail. They'll do it all the time. So yeah, and not all reptiles do that. My bearded dragon will never drop his tail. He can't, he won't, and I'm glad. Now, day geckos have the ability to shed or slow their skin, so they'll drop their skin if they feel scared. So if you go to handle them and they don't want to be handled, they can just drop their skin. I've never seen it happen. I've just heard about it, and it sounds absolutely terrifying to me. I've seen pictures of them having patches missing, and I just, ugh, so gross. They're more of a display animal anyway, but if you had to handle them for some reason and they did that, that's normal. They're not sick. It's a normal thing. And they'll grow back, of course. Metabolic bone disease is fully preventable and not reversible. So once it happens, you can stop it, but you can't reverse it. It's pretty common in bearded dragons, so that's why I'm mentioning it. This is the second time I've actually made a whole video about it. You want to make sure that your reptiles are getting adequate calcium and then also UVB lighting. So make sure that they're getting that linear lighting and they're getting the right wattage for their species. Arcadia is what I like to get. I think they're the best. And they also have a lighting guide online that's really helpful. So I really recommend checking that out. And you can just put in the animals or the species that you have, and it'll tell you based on how far away they are from the light, what wattage light they would need, and basically give you the best suggestion to get. And they last for a year. So a lot of other UVBs are only good for 6 months and you have to change them out. But Arcadia, even though they're a little bit more, you're only swapping them out once a year. So you know that they have good UVB for a full year. Another reason why I don't recommend free roaming, like just leaving the enclosure open for your bearded dragon to just free roam, is they really need that UVB to thrive and be healthy. So anytime Kaiju's out, I'm with him. Plus it's good bonding time, and I don't want to miss out on that. But I would never just let him come and go. Plus I have seen people with ramps, and their skeletal structure is pretty fragile. If they were to fall, they could get very hurt or even die. So I don't recommend doing that kind of stuff. Make sure that when you have your reptile out, you're with them, you're spending time with them. That's part of having these awesome pets, is you're able to interact with them and enjoy that time. So I personally would not just let them free roam. Plus they could get stepped on, they could get lost, they could get hurt, they could eat something they're not supposed to. So I just don't recommend free roaming. Guess that's not what this video is about, is it? Venom. It's not just for snakes anymore. There are also reptiles that have venom. For example, the Mexican beaded lizard, the Gila monster, and the Komodo dragon. They are all venomous lizards. Otherwise, snakes can be venomous. So since I'm on the subject, because this comes up in the reptile community, you may or may not have noticed this, there is a difference between venomous and poisonous. Venomous is where the creature has to inject the poison into you. Poisonous is if you were to like lick them, you'd get poisoned. So some frogs are poisonous, snakes venomous because they're injecting it into you. Or with hognose snakes, they're mildly venomous. They bite you, but then the venom doesn't come from the teeth. They kind of like work it in. So it kind of just gets in there, but they're very mild. Just something to be aware of. You won't die though from a hognose snake bite, probably. I don't think anyone's ever died of one. Unless you had like a horrible allergic reaction. You'll be fine. And yeah, you might see people cringe at the misuse of poisonous versus venomous. So now you know. And you can make sure that you're referring to the right one. Also, other things that are poisonous would be toads, salamanders, and newts. So don't lick any of those. Also, just don't lick any reptiles or amphibians. It's just a good idea. Just don't do that. I wouldn't lick your dog. Don't lick my lizard. Another fun fact, many reptiles are solitary creatures, but not all are. There are some that thrive in groups. So for example, anoles, they're a reptile that like to be in groups. Mourning geckos and garter snakes. Sure, there are many, many more, but those are 3 that I'm aware of off the top of my head. So for example, if they are not a communal reptile, which a lot of them aren't, do not house multiple together. Even if they might just get along and they might be fine, at any point they could just decide, wait, I want the rest of that food, or I want to be under the heat lamp. I want the warmth. I want the UVB. So they can hog resources, and that's not good. Even if they're not attacking each other, they can have trouble thriving. So I think it's just best to just avoid housing multiple together. That's my advice as a cautious reptile keeper. Now, on the flip side, some of them thrive in pairs or more. For example, I knew somebody who had anoles, and they ended up getting one anole because they worked at a grocery store, and the anole just arrived on produce. So they took it home, and then they decided to get a couple more. So they had 3. Well, one of the anoles got injured. So they ended up ganging up on that one. And then when they went away on a trip, they came back to 1. So I guess they were hungry. So even if they're communal, you still have that risk that they might still attack. So just something to know. That's a risk. Yeah. Yeah. And some reptiles do not like to see other reptiles. They can stress out from it. So one thing you can do is house your reptiles that are awake during the day on one side of the room, and then ones that are awake at night on the other side of the room. So Kaiju and Flaco are the only ones that are awake during the day. They technically can see each other, but it's not easy. He has to really be looking over there and trying to see the snake. The geckos can see pretty much everything, but they're asleep during the day, so they're completely fine. But if you do have ones that are awake at the same time, putting something to obstruct their view is a good idea. So I've put up cardboard or paper or fabric. Just make sure that whatever you're putting up, that it's not by the heat lamp so it doesn't catch fire. Just make sure that you don't have any fire hazards going on. Okay, friends. Now I'm saving the uncomfortable for last. So we're going to talk about like reproduction stuff. So if you're a kid or you don't want to hear this, you just might want to stop watching now, because it's going to get a little gross. I'll start off with the not so gross stuff so you have time. Not all reptiles lay eggs. Some give live births. For example, skinks and garter snakes all give live births. They do not lay eggs. Let's see. And if they do, if a reptile does lay eggs, it can be as little as 1 at a time and maybe a couple times a year, or 20 to 30 at a time and maybe once or twice a year. Fun fact, morning geckos are all female. So they basically make clones of themselves. So if you have one, you can end up with many. So if you have one and you don't want many, you'll want to make sure that you take those eggs as they happen and freeze them. So put them in your freezer, freeze them just to make sure that they don't turn into geckos along the line, like on their way to the garbage dump. And somehow, if it happens, they come out of the egg. It's just a good idea. Just make sure that you freeze them before you throw them away. Some reptiles die while they're breeding. For example, Leachianus geckos, they will attack each other. The female will beat up the male, and if he is able to take it, then she decides that they are a worthy mate for them, most likely. They still might not like them, but that's something that they do often do, and sometimes the male dies. So that's just something to be aware of. And they're not the only ones. There are other reptiles that just fight, or while they're breeding, they end up dying. Also, if you are breeding crested geckos, it's not uncommon for them to drop a tail when they're breeding, because that can also be stress as well. If you do decide to breed, definitely do your research. Make sure that you don't leave them in their enclosure, because even if they're a breeding pair, the male will harass the female. And it's just very uncomfortable for that to happen consistently. I mean, the male will probably do it every day. So don't put the female through that. Make sure that you separate them when they're not breeding, if you decide to breed. There's a lot of breeders out there, so I'll let you decide to make your decision. You're your own person, but I personally think there's enough breeders out there. I wouldn't do it. Okay, so this is your second and final warning. It's going to get gross, okay? I'm going to talk about the male anatomy of reptiles. So if you're a kid or you're an adult and you don't really want to hear about that, just stop watching, please. Please. Because it's going to get icky. I'm going to try to make it as PG as possible because I don't want this video to be canceled, and also I'm hoping to be educational and not. Anyway, so here we go. Male reptiles have hemipenes. So what that means is mammals have one male part and reptiles have two. So I guess it helps with the breeding process for them to be able to breed easier. So that's a thing. The reason why I mentioned the hemipenes is if you have a male crested gecko, at some point they're probably going to pop them out, and you might think that they're having a prolapse, but they're not. They're just doing a male thing that the males like to do, and yeah, so they usually just get them back in just fine. But if they don't get them back in, at some point you might need to help, and I've never had to do that. But I heard honey can help, but I've never had to do that. So if you're in that boat, this is not the video. Definitely look up something online if you have that problem. Yeah, I would say increase the humidity. Yeah, maybe go to the vet. If you're trying to determine if your reptile is male or female, there will be, well, male crested geckos are very obviously male. Like you can see those hemipenes, let me tell you. Bearded dragons are a little bit different. You have to look up. So what you do is you look underneath where the tail is by the base, by their vent, light a flashlight on the other side, and you'll see two bumps. Don't lift their tail up really high and do it, because if you do it, it kind of hurts their back. I know that they don't complain because they don't have vocal cords, but let's just not do that to them. Just don't. That's another fun fact I guess I forgot to mention, is they don't have vocal cords. Bearded dragons don't. So yeah. They won't complain. So don't make it that they would have to if they could, right? Yeah. The other thing is you can also ask your vet or the breeder if they know what the sex is of the reptile. Sometimes it's really early to tell. So when you buy your reptile, they might say they think that it's male or female. There are different things that show, like with snakes, if the tail is really long, I guess it's a male. But yeah, just a little bit different. Since we're still talking about hemipenes, let's talk about this. If you have a male lizard, they will at some point relieve themselves because they just need to. So crested geckos can do it whenever they seem to want to, and bearded dragons, when they're running all over the enclosure, they could very well be feeling frisky. So you might want to get them a stuffed animal or their own special sock or something. They're just trying to get out that aggression, I guess. Not aggression. They're trying to enjoy themselves. And anyway, make sure you help them out. Also, rough surfaces can help out with wearing the pores down. So since we're talking about pores, femoral pores are on the underside of the thighs of reptiles, and what those are used for, with bearded dragons, for example, they will drag part of their body on things to leave a pheromone scent to mark their territory and try to attract a mate. These can get clogged, so it's nice to have rough surfaces such as rocks or, stone, hide, tree, to be able to allow them to naturally wear those down and get those pores cleaned out. That's one reason why I don't go bioactive with my bearded dragon, is not only can crickets very often carry parasites, I also don't want them to have any issues with wearing down those pores, and also I don't want them to get infected, because that's not good. I'm not against bioactive for bearded dragons at all. I'm absolutely not. It's just my personal preference. And there are other things you can do too, like dig boxes and stuff, other things for enrichment. Okay, so that's it. Those are some fun reptile facts. I hope you found them interesting. Maybe you learned something new. If you did, feel free to leave a comment below. I would love to hear if any of these things you weren't aware of and learned something. Otherwise, I will see you in the comments, and you will see me next time. Thanks for stopping by. Bye.